name is Rod Faulds. I am an artist and former arts administrator, museum person. And we're standing in my studio at Florida Atlantic University, where for over 20 years I was the university gallery's director. And in terms of my development as an artist, certainly my professional career has been highly influential. I was an undergraduate fine arts studio major. I then at graduate school, graduate school time, I went into the world of exhibition design, or really making exhibitions, curating exhibitions in a university in Southern California, California State University, Fullerton. And subsequently, I got a job, and in New England, of all places. I grew up in California, and actually my life there as a kind of hippie and surfer is germane to my art practice. And it's something that shows up in the artwork sometimes, but it's been something, surfing in particular, has come in and out of my life, and certainly since I've lived here in Florida over 20 years, I definitely got re-addicted big time. After my studies and working in the field, museum field, at a certain point here at FAU, I was running the galleries, teaching a museum studies and galleries class, and I started threatening myself and verbalizing to others that I was going to start making art again. And I had an example, or somebody that I often talked about, a photographer by the name of John Copeland's, who had also had a career as an editor. He edited Art Forum magazine. He also directed a museum. And at the age of 60, he started making work. By the time he died at 93, he was an internationally known artist for work that was it was all of his aging body, but it was highly abstract. And he made really big photographs, like 3 photographs would be 8 feet wide, and that would comprise a work. Oftentimes there was more than one image. But in terms of my influences in starting to make work again in 2009 is when I date it to at least showing the work, because I conveniently put myself into faculty exhibition at FAU. But I was very influenced when I was an undergraduate in a Los Angeles artist by the name of Robert Heineken. And Robert Heineken had the attitude that there were already enough photographs in the world. And this, mind you, this is well before the internet, and he already was sort of like mining the media out there, magazines and other images, to make artwork or photographic artwork, and the authorship of the images to him wasn't necessarily very important. He also worked with grids a lot of time. He would have several photographs in a grid, but when I started making the work, I actually was mostly influenced by a painter by the name of Gene Davis, coming out of the Washington, D.C. Color School. And the works I made actually never really, he was a stripe painter, very formal painter, lots of vertical stripes of varying colors, and significant artist. And that's another thing, I guess, about my work, and given the fact that I've been so involved in museums and curating exhibitions, that I can't get away from art history, try as I might sometimes. But nevertheless, I started making these works. They were indeed digital from the beginning, that would combine maybe 100 or so photographs into one image. And the images obviously, the images were repetitive, But nevertheless, they were channeling, you might say, serial art of the 1970s, or formalist geometric art. And the commitment to abstraction was strong, but obviously photography is not supposed to be abstract, right? But nevertheless, there actually is a long history of abstract photography from early in the 20th century. And in 2014, here at FAU, I did an exhibition. It was one of the, I think, finest exhibitions I ever curated. But it was an exhibition called Alterations. And as 22 photographers who you would say more or less are making abstract work. And it was multi-generational, from an artist in her 70s, Barbara Caston, to some younger artists in their late 20s. And the work, while we definitely, and you know, I had somebody from University of Miami, an art historian there, write an essay for the catalog. I wrote an essay talking about an exhibition that I had done as a graduate student called Object Illusion Reality in 1975, I guess, that had certain artists in it that were also making abstract photography. Was research for me to become familiar again, I want to say not totally authoritatively, but as much as I could, of other artists that were working in this field of abstract photography, if you will. But also, I had participated, as a matter of fact, this work right here is from 1973, and it's indicative of what was referred to as non-silver photography or alternative photography. And its heyday was kind of in the early 70s when I was going to school. I did this exhibition as a curator in 2014 called Alterations, Built, Blended, Processed. And many of the artists in the exhibition are influential to me. And as I was saying, in terms of looking at a lot of other artists' work, I was trying to make sure that I knew what was going on out there in the field. And indeed, something that I'm quite committed to, interested in, is the kind of history of photography, how it's used, and the fact that even though we think of it as a truthful medium, we all know very much by now, given Photoshop and all of these other things, that it's not so truthful. And so things like how deep is the space that is depicted is something that I have always, in a sense, tried to explore or exploit. And generally, I am interested in a very shallow space. And the reason for that partly has to do with, again, I mentioned Gene Davis, and a painter, that in many ways my reference in art is painting as much as photography, and sort of where they cross over. In fact, I often say that the work is someplace between being abstract and figurative. The shallow space intrigues me because, in part, I want to say it is the way that we are often seeing in our day-to-day realities, whether we're, you know, looking at screens, looking at a book, in terms of how our perception works, the fact that we can block out a lot of stuff. But it's also, again, it's really this reference to abstract art, abstract painting, and the history of it, where it's not about an illusion. And to me, the intrigue in photography, it's difficult for, you know, photography is very good at representing things, but we don't think of it necessarily in, I mean, obviously we do sometimes see detailed photography that amazes us. However, in terms of how we think about it, I want to say it's more in these kind of general terms of illusion. And so I'm definitely interested in getting into a space that I want to say is on that painting side of the equation, but of course I also love what I call the kind of intuitive or built-in photographic qualities, the way it renders light. This image behind me, just for instance, relative to the early work, it is still a grid. There's a four vertical rectangles, and then there's some stuff that is breaking those lines, but nevertheless it's very much a built thing. It's a construct. It is like a collage or a montage, but I'm even though I'm using some tools like Photoshop or digital tools, it's not like, I don't see it as being a trick. I'm not trying to make a trick. I'm trying to make a certain kind of space.
Now, your subject matter, how do you come up with the subject matter, and how do you pair them? Because I've seen a lot of your work where you have a very, looking for a word to use, fascinating way of pairing things together, but then it flows so well. What's the genesis of that technique?
Right. Well, in some ways, even though, I mean, I don't want my comments to be disparaging of landscape photography, for instance, because in many ways, actually, I do feel like I am reflecting the real world, and sometimes that it is a landscape, but something that I mean, artists make rules for themselves, right? And I definitely make some rules, but, you know, I break my own rules too, but I see my pictures as being geographic. That is, even if there are three subjects or three distinct objects, they are all coming from a particular physical location, or, you know, a contiguous physical location, and it's everything from, you know, not that I'm not trying to be a cubist where somehow you're representing reality from three different angles, but I do feel that this idea that it's hard to capture things in one picture, that multiple images of a particular subject maybe is partly what I'm doing. But it's more this notion of constructing a picture, but also constructing it from a particular contained geographical location or conditions. So, you know, there are certain pictures that I make in Florida because I spend a lot of time in New York, certain pictures that are in New York, and if I'm referring to this picture, this is very much a Florida picture. I have a pool at our home. That is the blue background. The blue hoses are the vacuum hose, and those are sea grape leaves that sometimes end up in the pool, floating in the pool. And the one other component is cell phone towers. Now, there may be, and so it's definitely a Florida picture. The cell phone towers definitely come from Florida, but you know, they're not. I don't have any cell phone towers in my pool, but there is something about, you know, I guess I want to say there's a kind of geometry, and maybe even a kind of, you know, there are coordinates from all of these wires that are coming off of the cell phone towers, and the more curvilinear form of the vacuum hose. So, and to me, it's you know, it's like things that you don't necessarily look at, like why on earth would you photograph your pool vacuum? It's like not a particularly interesting subject, but it is a kind of reflection of contemporary life and technology in the same way that the cell phone tower is. And then nature, that is, not even the water is nature, right? It's, even though I have a salt chlorinator, it's still making chlorine, which is not, I guess, you know, I guess chlorine is natural in some instances, but, and even the leaves have this some kind of stuff growing on them that's almost like mold or something. And to what degree is that a natural occurrence? To what degree is our world and the state of our environment? And that is that content, which I will admit it's quiet. I'm not like an environmental activist. I'm not trying to make art that's somehow going to change the world. But hopefully some of the cues or things that I just described, when people look at the images, they might think about it. And I am very interested and concerned about our world. So recently, and I've made a number of images of plastic bags in trees in New York. And to me, it's like, it's somehow symbolic, you know, like these, and sometimes the plastic just like stays in the tree for 2 years. It's amazing. This section and actually this whole wall, in a way, is a moving collage or assemblage, and it includes, certainly this work closest to me is a completed work that's been exhibited, but these materials actually are really a combination of tests and also, I don't know, just stuff that I stick up, because another part of my process is making collages, which I think they subscribe to many of the things that I've already talked about in terms of images, shallow space, juxtaposing things. In fact, even this right here is, you can see there's such, here in a chunk of this surfing picture, this really strong horizontal line dividing it. Well, I actually make collages that I arbitrarily cut a line in magazines and put them together. This happens to be a continuous picture, but you see it's got this, it's 3.5 inches wide. Well, this is a section from one of those magazines, and but it's really just a kind of hodgepodge of things, everything from, this is a picture of, this is my birth picture, to plant life, to a piece of a palm, to fabrics that I'm attempting to work or incorporate into my work. And I have had both, I've had the privilege and pleasure of, my studio is located in a part of FAU where they bring surplus furniture, other objects that are either going to get thrown away or repurposed. This is something that also, like, I'm in the process of moving out of this studio because I'm no longer with FAU, but there's a lot of work yet to come. There was an exhibition that I did in Miami in April of 2022 that had a 40-foot wall of maps. I have a lot of maps. You don't see any maps here, but, and other materials. This is coffee suspended in an acrylic, clear acrylic that I've used. This is similarly some material that after a hurricane, I found a huge amount of this stuff. It looks maybe like feces or some kind of organic matter. And so I have begun to, these are tests for how I can put this stuff in an acrylic medium. And relative to what I was saying before about environmentalism, or I don't like to use resin, even though I'm very familiar with it from surfing and making surfboards, but and I don't like to like spray stuff because of the carbon emission. So a lot of it is it's kind of like when I stick it up, I think about it just like other things on the wall, like I'm kind of composing, but really it's just kind of experiments and also things that are important to me, like Michael February, who's a young surfer from South Africa. He's like this amazing surfer, and because I'm interested in surf culture, there's it's very interesting. There's an interesting dynamic of black people and surfing. Like, people don't know that the interaction that, I mean, white surfers have like colonized the world in a way and haven't been particularly kind to certain locations. Anyways, Michael February is the first black surfer on the International Surfing Tour. This is something that I put in a surfboard. And it's the earlier, this repetitive photography, gridded work. It's a section of it. Okay, so something that I have been doing relative to accumulating things that have wound up in or will wind up in works or an environment is my own selected waste materials. So I drink a lot of coffee, and these elements here on the wall are a coffee bag that has been splayed, and actually these are examples of one that's got an image, a cutout in it. But this on the wall, in a sense, was just trying to figure out how I might be able to display multiple versions of them. And I have, I don't know, lots of these bags. I drink a little too much coffee. And I also go to Starbucks or other coffee purveyors, and when I am in Florida, I save all of my cups. And what you're looking at here are splayed cups. That is, the cup is opened up and then the bottom is pulled out. And I have used them as collage elements. And even though these are tests, I'm not positive that it's a that I consider this to be a finished work. There's also the element of fabric and coffee and acrylic that is spread over this fabric. So in other words, coffee as a pigment, or coffee as a material. And I can't say a huge amount about it. Like, I mean, I'm not going to I can't lecture people on coffee, whether it's good, bad. In fact, I'm even a little guilty that I drink so much of it and that I patronize Starbucks so much. But to me, it's also the fact that, you know, I've gathered so much of it. I'm just one little, small little person, and it speaks to waste. And even though I know that waste and how we recycle, etc., is not going to solve our climate problems, it's kind of a state of mind. I see it in a variety of ways. I mean, simply on the one hand, a kind of communication media, but one that both allows the receiver or the viewer to have fun with interpreting, or the viewer is engaged with what the communication is supposed to be about, as opposed to let's say literary communication. Not that literary communication can't have open ends and room for interpretation. To me, there's also definitely a spiritual dimension to it, and I guess the easiest way for me to relate to it, or one way for me to relate to it in my own case, is I mentioned earlier surfing and an engagement with nature. Art is an engagement with a world of questions, perhaps particularly the question of, in a scientific way, how do we see? What is the, and there are artists that I could name, but unnecessary really, that have asked this question about the actual perceptual nature of seeing, and have challenged that. And to me, that is a channel or a place to go actually to another world. And and I hate to be art historical, but I often use surrealism or even abstract art, which I am engaged in, that it gives one an opportunity to somehow see a world that is unlike the world that we occupy on a daily basis. Final thoughts. Well, I am delighted to be calling myself first an artist. And while I'm indebted to my career as a presenter of exhibitions and a presenter of artists, I feel that I've educated myself greatly through my profession or my professional career. And I'm really looking forward to the next phase where my engagement is in making works that I'm the sole author of, and looking forward to it. Thank you.